that's not a good sign. It usually means.
Alrighty, we're live.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start the meeting.
This is true.
Okay, I need to bring up the fees. So we can pick up on 3281. Oh, do not. So on 3281, we did kind of go through last committee meeting, added some information to align more with our district. What I'm wondering is, since this is not a policy we have, if everyone would just be comfortable in going ahead and removing the lined out verbiage, because that's just not what we have to have.
Right, it's not anything
It
existing.
isn't.
Yeah.
So we could actually get kind of a cleaner look
Yeah.
of this policy.
No, we're a moment tonight.
Okay. And then we can kind of go through the whole thing and make sure that yeah, the green that I added, which is kind of hard to see that it's green, came from statute, well, not from statute, from proposed legislation, I should say.
Yeah, it looks good.
Mm-hmm, I agree, it's reasonable. Good Matt. Actually, that's a really smart way of stating that,
Which one?
the reasonable accommodation.
Yeah, that was something that, we want to make sure that people understand we'll do what we can.
Just like we do with ADA.
Yep.
So on the dress code, as long as a student adheres to the dress code policy, they can choose to dress in any way that they want, correct?
As long as it adheres to policy, correct? Which, my struggle with what was on this draft that we were given, it was like, well, if you're gonna, so if your attire promotes whatever you believe in, you're okay, but that conflicts with the dress code, which says you can't have anything. I mean, you can't advocate, drugs, alcohol,
Right.
any of that.
Right.
Any illegal
So,
activity.
yeah.
Right.
Okay, and then I wasn't sure who put the purple items on there, but I left them on there in case we didn't.
Is that like a whole bunch of bullet points?
Yeah.
I think I had added those from
Okay.
conversations I had.
Okay, perfect, perfect.
As like, more like, things we should talk about.
Right, make sure we're
Yeah.
covering this. Yes, okay, so I cleaned out all the strikeouts, I think. Alright. Are we having an internet issue?
Not that I'm aware of.
LTE works. So I think the word transgender is being used awkwardly
Okay,
in the paragraph of that headline. It's being treated like a noun or a proper noun, and it's usually used as a descriptor, and so it just looks awkward.
So it says transgender is
Yeah.
perceived.
Yeah, transgender is perceived.
okay,
Like it's like it's a proper noun, like Bethany is perceived by some.
okay,
I think it would make more sense to say,
The transgender student.
yeah, or transgender identities, or, I was thinking about this on the way here about, because I couldn't think of how to phrase it in a way that wasn't awkward, but also didn't concede things that we don't want to concede.
okay, so if we stated transgender identity is perceived by some as noting or relating to a
Yeah.
person whose gender identity does not correspond to the person's sex.
Yeah, I think that's fine, or at least it's
Okay.
better.
That was recommended also in that gender resource guide that Ramona.
Oh,
gave to
right.
us. They said that too, to use transgender identified,
Transgender
or, you know.
transgender identified persons, or identifying persons. Transgender, no, I think transgender identity makes more sense.
I think, yeah, in this, I think it makes more sense.
But then the title should be, I think, transgender identity too.
Should mirror the term.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And if we look at the formula that you guys have done for gender identity, gender expression, and
Right.
sexual orientation,
Right.
it elicits the same response, so that
Right.
helps.
Or noting or relating to a person who does not conform to society's gender norms or roles, transgender identity.
I think, noting or relating to a person.
It's not a subject matter of the district, any of its buildings, staff members, educators, or any of its employees shall discuss, address, or educate children about. So then,
I think two maybe doesn't. Noting or relating to a person who does not conform to society gender norms. I don't know if that would be transgender, that would just be other. Other gender identity, like someone who identifies as a wolf, I don't think is considered transgender.
That's considered,
Yeah, there's a name for it, I forget what it is. I think furry might actually be a subset of identifying as a wolf.
I think you're correct. It's
Yeah.
a slang term for, it's all gender dysphoria.
Right.
You don't know this?
You haven't
It's
seen
really
the-
hard to keep up.
You haven't seen the fairies and
knows that they actually surgically alter their ears?
I know when transgender became really
They were
focused
never-
on someone, there was someone
I mean,
that
people
actually had
actually-
scales, but only
Yes.
It's
see
not a
us.
real,
Yes.
it's like having a
Yes.
imaginary friend, just
And they
like
alter their
to
teeth,
yourself
they
in
like put
society.
in canine
That is
teeth.
true, they do, I've seen that.
File them and, oh yeah.
California.
Southwest Washington.
And Washington. And New York. I'm sorry?
They file them.
They file them down, they go to a dentist, there's doctors that take advantage of all this.
So you can
It's
off
sad.
my files and see.
It's self-mutilation, so.
It is.
It is,
Yes.
it's a different version of cutting.
It is, yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Do you notice cutting has gone by the wayside all of a sudden?
No, it hasn't.
Oh, it really hasn't?
No.
You just don't hear about it.
You just don't hear about it
Yeah,
anymore.
it's just not at the forefront.
It's not a thing.
Prevalent.
So if we changed this for transgender identity to state transgender identity is perceived by some as noting or relating to a person whose gender identity does not correspond to the person's sex or who does not conform to society, gender norms, or roles.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think it's a bit awkward, but it's good enough.
Well, I'm not up for good enough, I want it to be perfect.
That's
Being
good.
perfect doesn't exist.
It does.
No, language is quantized though. So it
No,
can't-
trust me, people can edit things until you have to sit. I work in this world. They will edit until you have to tell them to stop.
I'm assuming there's an objective standard for perfect
Yeah, it is.
That would be mine.
So then Ramona, where it says transgender is not a subject matter of the district, is that gonna be also transgender identity?
Yes.
Yes.
Also there? No, I like it, it's formulaic, it's like black and white. You know my world, it's never black and white.
Maybe it's perceived by some as referring to a person whose gender identity does not correspond to the person's sex. I think, or who does not conform to society, gender norms or rules. I think that word, I don't think that word needs to be there. Does not correspond to the person's sex. I think that sentence can end there. Was-
Just get rid of the society
Number
gender
2.
norms.
All right, so I took it out, but I'm wondering if instead of saying person's sex, we should say person's biological sex.
Yes.
I think that makes sense, yeah.
I actually liked the, other piece that was added in there. I mean, cause some of this is about societal norms.
Right.
Okay, good point.
Does not correspond, okay.
I mean, it may not read, but I don't think any of this reads. It just, that is a part of it.
Yes.
Actually,
Also
that
there's-
does work in the case of children that decide to identify as a dog or a cat, correct?
Are those people considered transgender if you identify as a dog?
I think so. I
thought they were, but I could be
Well,
wrong.
I mean, they just throw them under transgender or trans, what's that?
Oh gosh.
So if we stated transgender identity is perceived by some as noting or relating to a person whose gender identity does not correspond to the person's biological sex, or one who does not conform to society, gender norms, or roles.
When you say or one, is the one they're referring to the gender identity that was the previous topic? Or a
Yes, a
person?
person.
Or a person who is not?
Is that giving them, to sort of Nate's point, is that giving them the power of deciding if you don't conform to gender norms of society, then you are transgender. Am I
Right, because
getting
let's
that?
say I'm a guy that is normal in every way except for I like shopping.
Right.
So.
But that
then
doesn't
you're
make you
not conforming.
transgender,
Well,
right?
this is what, but this says that that could.
Oh.
It's-
Yeah.
Because then you're not conforming to gender norms.
Right, are we, does this make it sound like we're conceding
I
that
think it's
if
too
you don't
broad.
conform to gender norms, then we accept that you might be,
Or is this the umbrella that encompasses all things against societal perspective?
right?
I actually appreciate the broad version, because if we start nitpicking too much, I'm nervous that there's gonna be like a component that's missed.
Okay, yeah, we can leave it.
That's just my opinion on
Okay, well, what if transgender identity is perceived by some as noting or relating to a person whose gender identity does not correspond to the person's biological sex, or person's biological sex, society, gender norms, or roles. Okay, that doesn't work, but.
Oh, I see what you're doing now.
You see, I'm just kind of throwing it all in one sentence.
More
Yeah.
commas than two separate things, yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's.
so whose gender identity does not correspond to the person's biological sex,
Societal.
Society.
Comma, society.
um,
I think societal.
expectations,
Yeah, it's better.
gender norms, or roles.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other kin is the correct terminology.
See, that's what I
People
thought.
that
Yeah.
identify as not entirely human.
I think
Did you
we have to
say
put
other
correcting
kin?
quotes here.
Oh,
Other
it's
kin.
Other kin, K-I-N, other and kin.
Okay, what am I putting in brackets?
I don't think we need to use that made up word.
No,
Other kin.
I agree.
Okay. Okay.
So we're basically here using the term transgender to refer to all of those
Mm-hmm.
non-standard
Correct.
gender identities.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
The Trevor Project is your friend if you really want to understand the rainbow spectrum.
I don't.
We just got a lot of money from,
Mackenzie Bezos.
no.
Is that the next Mrs. Bezos?
The best investor ever.
Maybe a couple. That'd be amazing. And a middle school.
I said that.
Okay.
Middle school, high school, and elementary with no strings
It's
attached.
just like, please, middle school.
So then after the transgender identity, I added the district recognizes and respects the biological sex of all students as recorded at birth and indicated on official documents such as a birth certificate. The district does not recognize gender identity as a factor in determining a student's sex. All school facilities, activities, programs, and sport teams are based on biological sex and not gender identity. Student facilities, students shall use the restrooms and locker rooms that correspond to their biological sex as identified at birth. Now, these next two the first paragraph is one we sort of came up with at the last meeting, but then the green section is actually on a legislative bill. So in the first paragraph is, in the event a student informs the building administration that they are transgender, the building administration shall work with the student and their parents to provide reasonable accommodations for the student if desired. Or, we can go a little bit more and say, in the event a student is unwilling or unable to use school facilities designated for the person's biological sex, the building administration shall work with the student and their parents to provide reasonable accommodations for the student. Reasonable accommodations shall not include allowing access to facilities designated by use, or for use by members of the opposite sex while members of the opposite sex are present or could be present. The advantage of the second paragraph is that we are not limiting the population to accommodate as only transgender. If someone doesn't want to use the female bathroom because they're overweight and the parents and the kiddo want to talk to the administrator about it, then they can make an accommodation for that. If they have hairy legs, hairy toes, that was something that they did talk about, is that you're now being all inclusive, that it's not so much that you have to be transgender, it can be that you just, maybe you have a phobia of going into the bathroom, yeah. Not so much disability, but that could be another reason, you know, so.
Well, you know, if you've been beaten up in a girl's restroom,
Yeah.
you really don't wanna go back into a girl's restroom.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct,
Or if you get teased about
right,
Yeah.
so,
sounds.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Or the scene in Carrie happens.
Oh,
Some, I mean, there's definitely girls that are really modest and there's.
yes, yeah.
And, I mean, I'm consuming waste too, but
Yeah.
not at my house.
No,
So, yeah.
I think the one in green is well said.
I would
Okay.
agree too.
Well stated, I should say.
Is there anything that needs to be added to that?
I have one question about the part right above school facilities.
Mm-hmm.
Cause I have heard of cases where people who are, think they're transgender will go to court and then have their birth certificates modified to say a different sex.
Mm-hmm.
Do we feel like the phrasing in the paragraph in red, the district recognizes and respects the biological sex of all students as recorded at birth and indicated on official documents, such as a birth certificate, what would trump there? The recorded at birth or the birth certificate if it were modified?
But we would, the only evidence we would have is the birth certificate. There isn't any other piece of information that would come our way from a school
So
standpoint.
it could be a modified birth certificate?
So it's,
We wouldn't know
you
it's
wanna say
modified, though,
recorded at
right?
birth to avoid that.
Right,
But I guess my question is what, like, that would be a birth certificate.
right.
From
It
a
will,
school,
but-
what, how would we, like, if somebody modified it, like, evidence that coming in, if it's a birth certificate, we wouldn't know to question it, we wouldn't know, we take a birth certificate.
Right.
That's a requirement, we have to have a birth certificate on file. There isn't another piece of information, so that's, when they say recorded at birth, is there another document that they document that
No,
on?
I mean,
Right,
No,
so.
you get a second birth certificate
But we,
with
like,
the new name on
I
it.
wouldn't necessarily, if, you know, a kid came to me, I wouldn't know that it's a second, I just
Sure.
would know it's their birth certificate,
Right.
so a school would have no way of knowing that.
yeah. Do we think it's worth, like, could we put a disclaimer in, like, you know, we altered birth certificates even by court order aren't accepted? I don't know, and maybe this is too far.
I think
You can't
that's
do
a
that.
slippery slope,
It
because we
is.
have to accept altered birth
Yeah.
certificates in adoptions, name changes,
Mhm.
everything else. If we start being nonlinear, I think that is dangerous.
So I don't think legally we can.
Yeah.
I don't think, if you receive a court order, you are required to adhere to what that court order says.
So if somebody alters their birth certificate, none of this policy matters then?
Well, but you can only alter the birth certificate through court order.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know, I mean, I suppose if we had a rush of fake birth certificates, that would be something to consider. But I'm not sure, I mean, if someone goes through the whole 9 yards while they're in school and gets to the point where they're crossed over,
They're legally changed.
yeah,
Right.
they're legally changed, we can't say, I mean, that's just, that would then fall under discrimination. if they've done everything.
Mhm.
What this policy, is my thought, is this policy is protecting everyone from those that are saying that they're one way or the other,
Mhm.
when they're not.
It's gonna be a very small percentage that actually complete that process and create school.
Right, it would be
I
hard to
agree.
get through it all during school, I suppose.
No, I understand your concern though.
Yeah, I just have heard about
I do.
that happening.
Yeah.
Is it a district policy that it has to be a certified birth certificate still? And so do we wanna put that in, such as a certified birth certificate, so that we actually have to see the legal
I
certified?
mean, we have to because, you know, in a lot of situations, and this may not happen in secondary often, but it happens in elementary quite a bit, where, you know, one parent has custody or custodial rights, and then, but another one isn't listed on any of the Skyward docs, it's not, and then, but that parent hasn't given up any rights, and so they're on the birth certificate, and so we have to have, like, there's lots of scenarios where the dad isn't on Skyward, he's not listed, and he comes and wants to pick up the kid, and the mom is saying, no, there's no court order that says he can't.
Right.
He's the dad,
He has
on the
a
birth
right.
certificate, he has a right, and so we have to have it certified. Has to be, and the same thing for like adoption paperwork, same thing for, separation agreements, it has to be signed by a judge, we have to have that information, so it's not, I mean, there's a lot of scenarios where people will bring in of a lawyer's drafting a piece of paper and wants to
Yeah.
do this, but nothing's been signed, and so, you know, I mean, we have to verify that it truly is from the courts.
So I appreciate the addition of certified, thank you.
Yeah, so if we change it to say as indicated on a certified birth certificate, that's the official or as formal,
Yeah.
Yeah.
As we can be, yeah.
right?
And it's a long process, so, I mean, now I will say, I imagine California and Washington State, maybe Oregon, push those through a little bit faster just because they're on the crazy train.
Right.
But, you know, like Montana won't even allow it. They shut it down.
Yeah.
I don't know what Idaho's rules are.
Yeah, it's a good question. I wonder if Idaho has any laws on the books.
Yeah.
About changing a birth certificate because of changing sex.
Yeah.
I highly doubt we have anything on the books.
Yeah, because
But
it's
how
all
does
just.
that work if your birth certificate's not from Idaho? Because you're not
Right.
seeking Idaho courts if you're changing it.
Right, actually, that's true, you are. And the only reason I know this is we had to go through a name change, but the child was birthed in California, and we lived in Idaho, so we had to change the name, and you seek the change through the courts here, and then you
Then
mail
you
off to
apply
California
for a birth certificate.
Yeah.
And I thought it was the other way,
No.
okay.
No. Yeah, no, it's wherever you live, that's the court that's gonna have jurisdiction.
So then that may be a non-issue, because I doubt Idaho's gonna be.
Yeah, we don't move very fast. Okay, the only thing I am questioning, is on the statement, if the all school facilities, activities, programs, and sports teams are based on biological sex and not gender identity. If we have any females playing on male sports teams, we've just said, no, you can't do that. But we've never let boys play on girls' teams.
Right.
I do believe I know we have girls on the wrestling team, but do we have a female wrestling component to wrestling, or does it matter? I mean, 'cause I know it's an individualized sport.
Yeah, it's an individual, I mean.
Okay,
I do think some of the girls do wrestle boys,
They do.
but
do.
it's an individual.
it's
Yeah.
not a team, okay,
They score points individually.
okay. So students shall use restrooms and locker rooms that correspond to their biological sex as identified at birth. The green paragraph. Students shall participate in school activities based on their biological sex as identified at birth. Activities under the direction of the Idaho High School Activities Association shall be subject to IHSAA rules and regulations. that is kind of the loophole, because they do allow girls to be on boys' teams, but not boys on girls' teams.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
School trips, in the event of an overnight trip sponsored by the district, students shall be assigned sleeping rooms corresponding to their biological sex as identified at birth. Dress code, all students shall dress in accordance to policy, is it to or with? It's with. In accordance with policy 3255, student dress. School dances, the district shall not impose different or unique practices of rules for same-sex couples who attend and or participate in school activities, including dances. This includes such matters as prohibition of attendance of same-sex student couples, limitations of public display of affection, or only applicable to same-sex couples, discounted couples tickets, gender identity for dance court titles that correspond to birth, sex, and other such distinctions.
Well, it's enough.
This paragraph actually came from the policy. This was not something we put on there. So this is something I believe that may merit some discussion.
I think so too.
We can all talk amongst ourselves.
I'm confused about the very,
The very last part was really confusing.
yes, that's what I'm
Yeah.
confused about too. Are
Yeah.
they saying that
Discounted couples.
if you were a male who identified as a female, that you could win homecoming queen? Is that what they're saying at the end there?
Yes, that's what it's saying.
I do not enjoy that part.
Okay. Okay, so the first sentence, the district shall not impose different or unique practices or rules for same-sex couples who attend and or participate in school activities, including dances. Do we need to state that or modify that or anything? Just the first sentence.
I also
So
like
it's
the whole
in,
section.
it's in,
Okay.
it contradicts what we said about here about school activities based on biological sex.
Okay.
We shouldn't impose different unique practices, and up here we're saying they have to participate in school based on their sex. So maybe we just say,
Well, they want to take the whole paragraph out, which I'm fine with. But what,
because this is strictly school dances, so it just should adhere to dances, it shouldn't include dances, it should be about school dances.
correct, I agree.
I don't know how to fix it, I guess, which is what I'm saying that.
You don't know how to fix it? No, it's a very awkward paragraph. So you don't have to say
We didn't
participate in
say
school
this.
activities. Dances.
With
school
dances,
Yeah.
school-sponsored dances.
School-sponsored dances.
School-sanctioned dances.
Yeah.
But what's the context of?
Did we already have, I'm sure we do, like, a non-discrimination policy separate from this?
We do.
Given whatever that one says, should we look at that, 'cause we might not need this at all, if that one already says we aren't gonna discriminate against people who are same-sex interested or whatever,
Mhm.
do we even need to have this?
I just think it's it's broad, it's just, we don't discriminate against and it's. for
It's
a variety of-
race, gender,
Well, it's all
so-
of that stuff,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and school activities does include dances, but now we've separated it out
Right.
to be its own hot topic.
Do we want, because, yeah. So then should this be school sports instead of school activities, and then we make school dances school activities?
But activities is also inclusive of
I
like
just-
band, drama,
Oh, boy.
yeah. Yeah, because we no longer have,
FFAs, school
what's it
activity,
called?
Oh, okay.
EPA, all those things.
See, I used to call them extracurriculars.
Matt Neff is the,
Athletic
yeah,
director.
no,
but
he's
now
not,
he's
he's the
athletic
activities director. Yeah, because we had, because there was a hyper focus on athletics, but yet there's band, there's drama, there's speech,
How
there's.
come you call them extracurriculars?
But some of
Those are
those are
not-
actually classes you
yeah.
really grade in, so they're not extracurriculars.
They're activities.
Because
Parts
your
of it is
participation
extracurricular.
based.
Things have gotten way complicated since I was in high school.
Right? You just need to keep growing and growing.
No, we really don't.
Yeah, so school dances are something outside of
Activities.
activities.
Yes.
Okay.
Wait, school dances are something outside of school activities?
Yes,
Sounds like a school activity.
it does sound like a school activity. But prom is not even held at the school, it's off-site. And that's a school-sponsored event, not an activity. So, I mean, we get all tripped up in our words.
Right.
Can we rename that paragraph then school activities and school-sponsored events?
How about school-sponsored events?
Okay, is that broad enough to include?
School-sponsored events would include,
School activities?
you were saying put it up here though.
Yeah, but I see that's not,
So he's meaning, could we get rid of this section and change school activities to school-sponsored events? Does school-sponsored events include school activities?
probably doesn't, huh?
I don't know, Len, what do you think?
Oh my God,
What?
just the words.
You know,
It's so complicated, it's ridiculous.
Well, the thing is if you don't make
Wow.
something all-inclusive, then it's become exclusive and it's called a loophole.
Okay, so. What's our intent here, I guess, is my question. What do we want, what are we trying to accomplish?
With school dances?
Well, it says school-sponsored events, like what, if this is just gonna be about dances, and I say we call it dances, if we're gonna have this statement encompassing activities, all sponsored events, all, do we want it to be all encompassing, or do we want it to be exclusive?
Well, the challenge is we, under school activities, say it's based on biological sex. However, if we do that for school dances, it's gonna be discriminatory.
I mean, I guess the difference
Do you need to plug
is,
in? No? Okay.
in
Dean swears
most,
it doesn't do this, so it didn't do this.
in most activities, what's unique to me about school dances, which is why I think you could just say school dance, is because in all the other things, you're signing up to do a part. In school dances, it's voluntary, you're coming, and so some of the activities, it's like the students are voting, it's not I'm signing up and an adult is not signing up to do something, I'm going to something, and it's
Right.
voluntary. A sport is, yes, it's voluntary, but I'm running track, or I'm doing something, and so I think as a we're plugging them into a spot and going, but this is they're going to an activity and.
Sort of participation
Yeah.
versus attendance, kind of.
Yeah. So. Right, cause like where you're saying we're contradicting ourselves with specific to activity, like if they're participating in, a sporting event, they're now, I mean, we don't have any control if they go to basketball games, but if they're actually playing basketball, we have a boys team, we have a girls team, you have to do, like, we're forcing that a little bit, but if they go to a dance, there's no, I mean, they can go to a dance, you know what I mean? So, in some of the things that go along with that dance, the kids are voting on it, it's not an oversight with really an adult. Does that make sense?
So what if it just states, participation in school-sanctioned dances shall be universal for all students. Different or unique practices or rules shall not be implemented for same-sex couples. End of story.
Yeah.
Short and sweet. Because the reality is, a same-sex couple is not a transgender person. It's the fact that we're entertaining a female-female couple or a male-male couple, we're not going to be saying that you can't do that. We're also not going to be promoting, I mean, because it's my understanding, like at these dances, the chaperones are going around, if even a guy-girl couple are dancing
Right.
inappropriately, going, knock it off.
Right.
You know, don't do that.
Well,
So,
is there a policy on school dances or rules for school dances?
There are, some guidelines in their handbooks, but, I mean, yeah, they're chaperones, and the idea is, you know, there's no PDA, you're separated, I mean, and a lot of it is parents are there, I mean, so there's staff members, but also parents are chaperones, and so there's some, you know, we're not making out in the school dance.
Yeah, we had serious rules around
Yeah.
school dances.
Yeah, they have guidelines, but I don't know that there's a policy. I know they have guidelines, it's pretty specific as far as what can happen and not happen, and, you know, no alcohol, obviously, and all that kind of stuff, but, I mean, I just think if if it was two girls, you would have no idea that they were a couple, they were best friends, and girls hug all the time you walk in or whatever, and so people are dancing, but whether it's two girls, two boys, a boy and a girl, I mean, no PDA, you're just dancing.
Okay.
And they're really ensuring that it's not vulgar dancing.
Yeah, and generally it's groups of kids that are
Yeah.
dancing together at these dances. There's not much coupling off really.
Oh, even in high school?
Yeah, it gets awkward, like, you almost wanna see like couples dancing here and there, and it's like, oh, we don't do that anymore, we go on group dates. You know, it's just, yeah, it's an interesting age.
So I think this is covered by the universal non-discrimination policy. Like, is there anything unique?
I think that's what
That's great.
Jacqueline's point was, it kinda does cover it, it just doesn't, I don't think it says dance.
Yeah, I looked it up, Jackie, so it's policy 3280, equal education, non-discrimination, and sex equity, and it does talk about, you know, not treating students differently in regards to programs, activities, services, or benefits, or limiting their rights or privileges, advantages. And it has to do, and then it ties in with the Title IX coordinator. So it's 3280.
I mean, we could take off the second sentence and just say, you know, it's universal for all students. Again, that paragraph that was there was put by our friends at ISBA.
Right.
So, what we haven't done I don't think in any of these quips is specifically said anything other than everything needs to correspond to biological sex. So maybe it would be more appropriate to take that second portion off.
Yeah.
Because then it looks like we're, you know, so we're
Very
just saying,
inclusive.
everyone can go to the dance, it doesn't matter.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's close enough to go on.
You guys have one sentence.
I'm all for it. Less can be more sometimes. All right, student records and privacy. This is another thing that was from ISBA. So the district's official records required by the law shall utilize the student's legal names to provide a student require school employees to use or report a student's legal name or gender. Such legal name or gender shall be utilized.
Isn't there a? Oh, change of official school records.
Do we want to use the word gender in this, or do we want to use sex?
Biological sex.
Well, official records requirement shall utilize the student's legal name as provided by the certified birth certificate. Would that just clarify it and just reiterate what asking for at registration from everyone. Like Lynn was saying, if we have a certified birth certificate, I mean, that's what we've gotta go with. If you want me to call you Superman, sorry, I'm gonna go with what's on the roster.
Right.
And let's just,
And if, you know, if somebody is named John and they wanna be called Johnny, then we definitely do that, but we
Mhm.
don't change any of
no,
them. All of their stuff is John.
yeah, school rosters and everything else correspond with that
Report
certified birth
cards, everything.
certificate.
If you legally change your name, does it get changed on your birth certificate?
Yep.
That works, okay.
That's like how it's changed, I think.
It
Yeah.
all, it
It's
all
the
goes
same
back to
as-
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's always done that way, because my birth certificate was changed. They even changed my parents on my birth certificate, so.
Well, I guess
There's
you,
that.
well, you'd have to, so like think about when you get married.
That's what I was just thinking, do they put that on your?
I
birth
think you
No.
have to,
No.
You don't
just
change
get
your
a
birth
certificate,
certificate,
your
just
birth-
your social security card.
right,
And then you get a certificate of marriage, and is that why they always require the certificate
Right.
of marriage with?
but if
your birth
you wanted
certificate.
to officially change your name, like for your driver's license, would you have, I mean, do you have to have the birth certificate? You wouldn't have to, would you?
Yes.
You
Well,
do?
in California, you do.
Well, if you are legally changing your name, you have to take that with you to the DMV, unless you have the court order with you. You have to have a legally approved document
To change
to
it?
change it. They
Okay.
will not just take your social security card. You have to have the birth certificate or the court order.
If they're following the policies.
Yeah, I mean, unless you schmooze them.
Well,
Schmoozing gets you
Post
where.
9/11, I think they are, like Jen on my driver's license versus Jennifer on my passport. I mean, they wouldn't let me get on the flight, so they're getting more and more specific on how
Oh, yeah.
those alignments hit. That was mine.
I'm waiting for that time with my last name. There's supposed to be a space in it, but credit card companies don't accept a space, or at least they didn't when I first got one, so.
Oh, we have that
Some of my
all the time.
documents, there's a space, and sometimes there's not. I'm always afraid of it.
We have 3 spaces.
Oh, wow. This little section is student records and privacy. Nothing in this states anything about privacy, so I think it's just gonna state student records.
Do we cover privacy elsewhere in this thing?
What are we being private about?
I guess we-
Confidentiality.
Confidentiality comes later.
Yeah.
I think we're not being private is hopefully the goal as far as parent involvement, I mean.
So official records required by law shall utilize the student's legal name as identified on a birth certificate, on a certified birth certificate. So is that better? In the event the official record requires identifying a student's gender, the student's biological sex as identified on the birth certificate shall be used.
Why do we have to identify gender?
I don't know, cause usually it's a circle hole that you have to fill in.
Can't rename them all sex from gender.
Isn't gender sex? Oh, we say gender instead of like sex, male and female?
It's just gotten hijacked now.
Right.
So,
So now we have to say things like that sentence.
is that better than what was there
Mhm.
I think so.
and clearer? that we're just sticking with what's on the birth certificate.
Right.
Okay.
Just because some people say gender is this, if it's
Right.
on a form and we have to write something, we're
Right.
writing this.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Okay. So, district records required by law to include students' name and or gender will be changed by the district following students' or former students' presentation of appropriate documentation to the district office. Okay,
Do you think it's a tactic to write like word spaghetti, so when this is handed down to a district, they look at it and they go, oh, I can't even wrap my head around the paragraph, let's just adopt it.
Whether it's
Yes.
a tactic, it's definitely a tactic, I don't know if it's used, but I think it definitely has been used.
Cause this is a bad paragraph. Now, there were some additions down below, right?
yeah. Compelled speeches, comments. So what if we just say district records will be changed upon upon the presentation of appropriate documentation?
I mean, the appropriate documentation would be,
The court order and all
so
that
why
stuff.
don't we just say that?
Yeah.
So former students, are you, like, can they?
Yeah, I would
directly
just say
change their-
district
Or they get
records
their
will be,
diploma with their
or-
name.
Okay.
Or transcripts.
Right.
Yeah.
District is gonna change, but it's district.
I think you should require a birth certificate, not an or, I think it should be an and.
So get
Yeah.
rid of the appropriate documentation and just cut right to the birth certificate?
Well, it's a copy of court order or amended birth certificate. I would go with just an amended birth certificate, cause
If any records are changed right now, like name or anything, what does the district require?
a birth
An
certificate.
updated birth certificate? So
Or-
like if I changed my name, I graduated Lakeland and I changed my name from Jennifer Hammond to Susie Lou Who.
Mhm.
If I brought in a birth certificate that says my name is now Susie Lou Who, I could then get a transcript that reflects that new name.
That's my
But based on
understanding.
my
Now, if
academic
you were
records.
married, you know, you would have to then bring in your marriage license and
So I would think
driver's license.
if we can keep it in alignment with the policy that we have now for changing records, it's just gonna kind of streamline it. So, yeah, a certified birth certificate is the requirement to change any records now. Would that change with the gender identity issue?
So, you have individuals coming in getting transcripts and they want it changed to their married name?
No, but you could have a situation where, I mean, not that I know of, we've never, but I'm just trying to
It
think
could
of a
happen,
scenario,
yeah.
it could happen, where somebody
I'm
got
thinking
married
that-
at, you know,
Yeah.
17 and parents were okay with it, and wants to apply to college, but transcripts are, so they, I don't know that it's ever happened, but they could.
Or worst case scenario, somebody's
I got into grad
domestic
school with my
victim
maiden name
and they need to
transcripts.
change their
Right,
identity.
I mean, there would be no
Right.
reason to,
Those
but somebody
things.
could.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about that, cause it just doesn't make sense, because you go to grad school and with your married name.
Well,
lots
and
of
now
those
a ton
things.
of stuff will say, I mean, they want all the names you've gone by.
Mhm.
right?
Exactly.
I mean, so that's the reality, and they'll accept it regardless, but if you have a degree, and, I mean, I don't know, there could be some scenarios where you'd want that.
So like in my mind, it was flagging for like domestic victims that really need to change identity.
True, true, true.
So they're gonna do that and be safe.
True, true,
And
true.
change, I always kind of think worst case scenarios sometimes. Maybe that's not the safest place to.
Watch a lot of Dateline.
Now I raised 2 daughters. That's enough.
What's that women's channel?
Lifetime.
Please, let's not talk about Hallmark people.
Oh, there's a lot of people that love Hallmark. Those feel-good movies, the Christmas movies.
I can almost say that I've never watched a Hallmark show, like a Christmas special. I'm still on the camp that Die Hard is a great Christmas movie.
Ooh, it is.
I still cannot convince my husband now.
So you think it's a Christmas movie, it is?
Yes, he was like, it's not a Christmas movie, I'm like, yeah, it is.
It's a Christmas party, it's a Christmas movie.
It is, it is.
It's a fun debate.
District office makes my change.
You guys all chimed in.
He doesn't think It's a Wonderful Life is a Christmas movie either.
What? Definitely is.
Okay, what if we just do that? District records may be changed by the district upon a current or former student's presentation of an amended certified birth certificate or a court order presented.
To the district office.
District is in there 3 times, that's fine. District records may be changed.
You can just say amended birth certificate or court order and call it good, or you can do it.
District records, what was that, I'm sorry?
Nothing,
Okay.
you fixed it.
Changed. Actually. Official school records may be changed upon a current or former student's presentation of an amended birth certificate or a court order. Already presenting, we don't need to provide. To the district.
Could we take out presentation of an amended and just say students amended certified birth certificate or court order presented to district office? That'd be less.
You could just say provide instead of present.
Official school records may be changed for former students.
Official school records may be changed when a current or former student presents
Take it.
amended certified birth certificate or a court order to the district office.
I was gonna say, I thought I was gonna say. I was like, maybe that's not right.
It just looks ugly. Give them some commas. Okay. So for confidentiality, school employees should not disclose, I don't like that word should not disclose a student's transgender status or sexual orientation to other individuals within the school environment unless there is a legitimate cause for the information to be disclosed to other school personnel.
You can say will not disclose.
Or shall go.
because saying should means it's optional. Maybe you will, maybe you
The
won't.
policy is all about shoulds.
Yeah.
You should follow this policy.
Can we add into this part
No. What would you like?
about, or I don't know if it should go somewhere else, but about that the school will not keep it a secret from parents under any circumstances?
Okay. I get what you're saying. Okay.
Cause that's our current practice is as soon as there's a kid discloses that we inform the parents, that's what we do right now.
Okay.
Is that written down anywhere?
I mean, so we put a protocol together for the principals, so they knew, but it was just, it's protocol, it's not, I don't know that it's written somewhere. But yeah, that's our current practice is, if a child, like, wants to be called something different, we've had situations where junior high kids dress a certain way when they leave home and then dress a different way when they're coming to school, and so we immediately call parents. So they're aware of it. And then we go with what the parents are asking. So when we've had situations where the parents are not in agreement and with whatever, then we align parents, because until they're 18, then it's parents, it's their decision.
And it could say that they have a transgender identity, they're gonna stick with how we phrased it before. Or,
I guess I look back at anything that a student confides in a staff member about that is controversial or concerning. The best practice is to contact administrators, and administrators go to parents about that. And I think
The only
our
time you
district is
wouldn't
really
would be
good.
if it's a situation where it's about the
The
parent,
parents.
specific to a CPS
Mhm.
situation.
my dad's beating me or something.
You know, and this is just something I think about. Is there any thought around that in certain cases, in certain families, use me as an example, oh, if I said I was gay, my parent would have thrown me out and I would have been homeless on the street. So is there consideration as to, do we understand the families before we understand the family environment, before we share information with parents?
Specific to that?
No?
I don't know how you could, I mean, one, kids could lie just to keep it a secret then.
True.
Or two, kids might have that fear and it not actually be grounded in reality.
And then you're asking teachers to make judgment calls.
True.
Right.
And
I
it's
hear what
a-
you're saying.
Yeah, it's just, I know in certain family environments, and I know this personally, having worked as a school counselor, that there's been times that children have been put in harm's way just by disclosing something to the parent that you were not aware was going to set the parent off.
But I think in that scenario, so
How do you anticipate criminal behavior?
well, and so you
Unless you have
so then you
pre-calls.
keep it a secret and you have a situation where then somehow at some point the parent finds out and now you.
Oh, I hear you,
I mean,
it's a
it's a
double-edged
no-win
sword, it's a no-win situation.
So, if we state within this policy, in the event a student discloses to a school employee their transgender identity or their sexual orientation, school employees may disclose this information to the student's parent or guardian.
I would say shall disclose.
Yeah.
And do we wanna say employee or
Maybe
administrator?
choice.
Well, that would imply that the employee's going to the administrator. But if that's
That's
not
what
a
I would-
requirement, then,
I mean, I'm sure that there are situations where kids are talking and it's just fun games and they're making jovial.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I'm sure in that scenario, no, like, it's not being, I'm not coming to Jacqueline to say something, I'm in the locker room talking. That probably doesn't get reported to anybody because it's not being said to me or with any action steps. It's when the kid is coming to me and saying something and then,
Well, there is a parental rights bill, House Bill 163, that just, it passed the House.
but it hasn't
And,
passed the Senate.
hasn't passed the Senate, but it does have language regarding them.
But
if
is
there's
in
this-
Idaho though too, already, isn't there, parental rights?
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, isn't it currently active though?
33, yeah, Idaho
Yeah.
Code 33-6001, and then they added some sections to it.
but I guess in the scenario of a kid comes to me and says, I'm struggling with this, have I told my parents? I feel like our teachers would just say, I encourage you to talk to your parents. I don't know that then the teacher at that point would just go call the parent because it's, the kid is, there's no action steps, they're not asking to do anything, they're not, and so the response would be, I'm encouraging you to talk to your parents. I think the time when they're actually talking to parents is when they're starting to dress or there's an action step behind it, is what I would assume.
They're writing a different name on papers.
Right, they
They're
wanna
wanting to
dress
be policy.
differently, or but if the kid said I'm struggling with something, I don't.
But okay, so I put my school counselor hat on. I would do that. I would say when my students came to me and said X, Y, and Z, I would say, have you, I had a lot of foster kids. I'm not getting along, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. Have you talked to your foster parent? No, why don't you go talk to your foster parent? Don't hear anything, don't hear anything. I follow up. Did you have this conversation with your foster
Right.
parent? So I don't know, and I don't know.
Would you supersede at that point and call a foster parent? If the kid is just like, hey,
I
I'm
would
here.
have a conversation I had conversations with the students as, one, maybe we should invite
Right.
parent or guardian in for a conversation. I can call them with you in the room. It was working with the student to make sure they were comfortable, and then that way I could gauge whether I was gonna put them in harm's way. Because I would have foster parents that would throw kids out.
Right.
So those are, in fact, in one of these situations, she was dressing differently at school. What am I talking about? This is the accident. Foster parent would only buy dresses. So yeah, it was one of these things, and it was constant, but when we finally came to a solution, she ended up moving foster parents, but I worked through that with her. I don't know how much time teachers have to do that, and I don't know if that's a school counseling
I think it would
function.
probably be more a counselor. My question is to rewrite this, if you have those locker room conversation where it goes, the kids are just talking, then you also have a situation where a kid could just say, hey, my friends are, and then the encouragement would be go to your parents, but if there's no action and they're not doing anything, they don't wanna use a different bathroom, is there a responsibility to say something at that point, or is it only when there is an action step that's being asked? I want to change my clothes, or call me a different name, or I'm asking you to do something that's outside of the norm, then we're telling, like, at what point, because I'm sure all those scenarios exist. I don't know.
And what I would like clarification is, Jennifer mentioned, as a teacher, if I've got the student who's like, I'm beginning to really wonder what's going on with them, and then they disclose to me, am I going to the administrator of my building for guidance, or am I just assuming free rein and calling the parent?
I mean, I don't know if we have this written down, we do specific to CPS, but I would think 100% of the time they're going to the administrator and the counselor and navigating that conversation.
So that school employees contacting parents just makes you say school employees, that's anyone from a bus driver to a parapro who might not have
Yep.
Right.
the knowledge and relationship with the student or the family.
And that, I mean, that could be a really hard conversation if they're blindsided.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
So,
Which I think there's been a couple of situations where that's been the case and the parents saying, no, and so it's like, okay, well, that's what we thought, but we just want you to know this is happening, so I mean, there are some of those gray lines where is it just a blanket inform?
I would like, personally, as a parent,
Blanket.
I would rather have a blanket, like, if you heard
This was
something about,
expressed, right.
not just they asked me to call them a different name, trigger personally.
I'm just gonna play devil's advocate and that one under, that you just wrote, in the event a student discloses, looking from the Title IX perspective, we shouldn't be treating them differently, so I just wanna throw that out there for liability sakes, that we, I don't know,
How, I guess, how would
I'm
we
not
treating-
comfortable with that for a liability.
How
What's
would we
Title
be treating
IX
them
say?
differently?
Because you're notifying their parents.
But we would
You're
notify-
disclosing that to
We
their
would
parents.
notify, so if I have a kid that I think is having risky behavior of any kind, take out the sexual nature of anything.
Cutting.
They're not being nice with friends, they're cutting, they're, anything that I thought was questionable as a principal, I would call the parent and just say, hey, I am seeing
This type of
different
behavior.
that is different than the norm that I've seen from this child or whatever. And I just want, is something going on? How can I help you? Do you know about this? Like, there, and, I mean, we do that all of the time.
But is that in policy elsewhere? I guess I'm trying to decipher, why are we treating these students differently in this one respect, in the confidentiality part of it?
Well, we do have a resolution in support of parents' rights in education where we specifically point out Idaho Code 321010, which says the interests of parents include the high duty and right to nurture and direct their child's destiny. So whether or not that relates to Title IX, there is Idaho code that says parents.
I don't see
Right.
this as different than any other different, like, if they've been going down this path and then all of a sudden something's changing, we always notify parents, that's just part of, we're partnering with them.
Then perhaps maybe instead of saying transgender identity or sexual orientation, say what you just said, out of the norm or unhealthy,
Or
whatever else, or
different.
different or something like that.
In the event
I'm
that a
afraid
student
of the school
discloses,
being sued.
I'm afraid that your way makes a loophole.
No, I get it, I know, it's not easy, and
Yeah.
believe me, this is just, yeah, it's not easy, but I
Yeah.
just,
could you say discloses concerning information to a parent?
I would say
And then-
discloses or exhibits concerning
Concerning.
behavior, and then you're notifying the parent, like,
Then you're talking about, if you.
don't you think?
Because if I see something with cuts,
Right,
I'm
then
not
you're
necessarily
opening it
gonna
up.
call the
Absolutely.
parent, I'm gonna go to
Yeah.
my administrator,
Why?
my counselor,
I'd be
and they're
afraid
gonna
that
triage
a
and go
teacher
from there,
would-
because there's so much.
What is
more.
concerning?
Range that,
Right.
yeah, maybe that teacher
Yeah.
doesn't think it's concerning and thinks it's a great thing, and so they don't tell me, and then my kid goes through a whole year at school, and I didn't know this was happening.
Oh, okay. So some way it just needs to, I just think any behavior that's out of the norm for that child, that's what I
Could
think
we
by
add that in
concerning.
and keep this? Could we
Yeah, I
say-
just, cause I think. if
We're
you're
using as an
encompassing
example, so
both-
you can put what you were saying and then use
Yeah.
this as an example.
Cause in my mind, it's not about the teacher thinking the behavior is concerning, it's anything that's abnormal to this child's behavior. Like, that is out of the norm of what this normal everyday that I see in this child. We are definitely calling parents and just going, hey, I'm noticing so-and-so's looking very sad, so-and-so is, they're struggling with their friend, I mean, it's all of those things, we always call parents.
so that House bill regarding the parental rights, it does, specify the public school's responsibility for notifying a student's parent or legal guardian regarding known changes in the student's mental, emotional, or physical health or well-being. I feel comfortable with that language.
I would use that language.
Just me personally.
Yes, that covers everything on all fronts.
And
And it's
take out,
legal.
take out the transgender identity
Identity or sexual
specifically.
orientation.
It's discriminatory.
Yeah, I just don't think that is discriminatory.
I know, but it is
Okay.
because.
What does it say on the,
The public school's responsibility for notifying a student's parent or legal guardian regarding known changes in the student's mental, emotional, or physical health or well-being.
That is well said, stated.
That's in, not my language.
Yeah, that.
Own it.
It's
It's
no,
good.
it's smart because there's no loopholes.
I think there's loopholes.
no, there's not, because mental and emotional well-being, transgender is gender dysphoria, it's in the DSM-5.
Not everyone agrees with that though.
Not everybody agrees with that.
I don't care.
But those teachers, or whoever it might be, you know, they, if that teacher doesn't, or person doesn't think that.
Okay, I'm
that's-
just gonna say this, that teacher that you're describing, they're not gonna report it anyway, even if the policy does say transgender.
But then at least they could get fired if they got found out.
They could still,
This,
it covers this, because it's a mental health
because of the
condition.
ethics code for educators.
I think they could have, then the teacher could have a lawsuit.
Not when it's in the DSM-5. It has not been taken out of the DSM-5.
I thought it was changed.
No.
The
Gender
DSM-5 has
dysphoria.
not been updated?
Well, the new
Yeah, it has.
DSM
Yeah, I thought they
has
changed it.
gender, no, it still has gender dysphoria in it.
How do they how does the new DSM-5 distinguish gender dysphoria from the, I guess you might call it celebration of transsexual identity?
Gender dysphoria is the distress a person experienced due to a mismatch between their gender identity, the personal sense of their own gender, and their sex assigned at birth.
So if there's not discomfort or whatever from that, then it wouldn't be,
It's in
then it wouldn't
the,
fall under gender dysphoria if there's no discomfort associated with the conflict between gender identity and biological sex.
Okay. Doesn't put gender identity.
Actually, what I'm gonna put here is probably something we should add to the discipline code too.
Okay.
So we think into our 3330.
Yes.
So it's the same concept, we're working with parents.
yeah, it says it's in the DSM-5.
I guess I don't understand how this pride relates to this in that sense, like.
Right, a teacher's not a doctor.
No, what I'm saying is that if it goes to court, the DSM-5 is the document that's going to decide with the school district. The documentation's there, it's legal, it's a medical disorder.
Until they change that though.
I'm actually shocked that it hasn't been changed.
I
almost
really
never do
thought
that.
It's interesting, it hasn't been changed, isn't it?
T and students.
I'm multitasking.
No worries.
There we go. So when they came out with the DSM-5 in 2013, gender identity disorder was eliminated and replaced with gender dysphoria. And then in 2022, they did the DSM-5 TR, which doesn't stand for treatment, it stands for text revision, just so we're all clear on that.
Mhm.
Because I thought it was. Anywho, we won't go there. It still maintains gender identity, or gender dysphoria, but they took gender identity disorder out.
DSM-5 articulates explicitly that gender nonconforming is not in itself a mental disorder. The fifth edition also includes a severed gender dysphoria.
In children.
And adults.
Is that Wikipedia? Well, then
No,
can we
this is,
specifically say gender dysphoria in here?
Psychiatry.org.
I was thinking in the policy we define transgender. I thought we would define it as a person suffering from gender dysphoria, personally. That's what I wanted to see happen.
Maybe it could be done. But, you know.
I'm sorry. Squirrel.
I do, I just also personally would want it to say something that makes it very clear if my kid says they have gender dysphoria, they identify as transgender, whatever that might be, that triggers a phone call to me.
So could you add that as an example?
Right.
I mean, if it's included, could it be added as an example?
Or would that be singling it out as an example?
Could put more than one example. Could put that-
Oh,
put it
we
on-
should put, then there you go, you put it in multiple
Yeah, so, yeah.
examples,
Include
that way you're
coding
not
and stuff, yeah.
singling it out. That's what would have to be done,
Right.
yeah.
Another,
Self-harm, depression, suffering from, yeah, anxiety,
Disorders.
yeah.
I said you guys were going extreme, how about they're just sad?
suicide thoughts.
No, actually, the new statistics coming out, or especially around females, committing suicide is,
Stacked.
Mhm.
yeah,
Females in general?
well, school-aged females.
Wonder why.
But I mean, suicide. What we've done to our children over the last 3, 4, 5 years, man, some of them are never gonna recover.
Including self-harm, self-mutilation, suicidal ideation, gender dysphoria.
What do you think?
You're giggling.
I'm just like, my elementary mind, not playing nice with their friends. Extremes.
Let's put that in too, I think that's a good example, we could take it down a notch.
Loud outbursts, Tourette's.
Sad.
Sad.
Are self-harm and self-mutilation the same thing?
Well, I was thinking suicidal ideation
Self-mutilation is
and
like a special
self-harm.
case of self-harm, I would say.
What's the difference between self-harm and suicidal ideation?
Self-harm,
Harm is
a
actually
lot
different.
of times kids just want to know that they can feel something,
Right.
but they're not willing to take it to the next level of actually killing themselves.
I mean, the other piece of self-harm can be that you're partaking in, activities that would harm you, so,
Oh, I see.
you know, going to Walmart as a female by yourself at 9:00 at night, you know, in this day and age, I mean, just,
Or
you're,
binging and purging.
Yeah.
right, you're doing risky behavior that is, more loading and self-worth kind of things, where self-mutilation obviously is truly hurting yourself. And
Yeah.
So can we add gender dysphoria to our, definition previously in some way?
We can do whatever we want. However, I think if we gender dysphoria, we would also need to add an explanation or a
We need to
definition
define it, yeah, I agree.
for self-harm, self-mutilation,
Oh.
suicidal ideation. I don't mind doing it, I'm just saying we need to consider that as well.
I just feel like that's muddying the waters with content specific to this, like, I mean, not the dysphoria, but the other stuff. Cause it,
Instead of gender dysphoria, I'd rather say changes in gender identity. Yeah, because if it's gender
Set it
dysphoria,
throughout.
then I think you can argue gender dysphoria is only when you identify as something other than your biological sex and it causes you distress. But if it doesn't cause you distress, then it's not gender dysphoria. I can see that argument happening. I think that would be a standard argument.
True, but man, it causes them so much stress when you mispronoun them. And that suicide rate, whether they trans or not, is very high in that population. But I see what you're saying. It's a loophole, and they look for loopholes everywhere.
Is it now or not? Thanks, everybody.
You know, if you're a good parent.
Well then, that being said, that paragraph needs to go away.
After your parentheses, I think the comma
Yeah.
is in a weird spot.
Not really.
And not to beat a dead horse, but does it need to say and or legal guardian? Or is that just implied?
Where?
Student's parent and or guardian?
You know, that's an interesting, question. In my work, we have to address everything parents or
Legal
guardians.
guardians.
Or even legal guardians, yeah.
Does this need to say that the staff tells the building administration and then the building administration shall disclose? I'm not sure how the sentence works. Maybe it's just me.
The sentence is saying basically any employee can find out information, and it will be the building administration that will disclose it to the student's parent. Because that prevents everybody from being, for lack of the appropriate word, an informant.
Right.
You know, everybody's hearing something, so then we're all making that phone call. No, let's just channel it back to, they're gonna talk to the
It's kind of the same
building.
process if there
Yeah.
was something with law enforcement and or something with CPS.
Okay, so the safe environment, it is the responsibility of the district to ensure all students have a safe school environment. Discrimination, harassment, bullying, and sexual harassment complaints shall be handled pursuant to policy 3280, equal education, non-discrimination, and sex equity, and policy 3295, hazing, harassment, intimidation, bullying, cyberbullying.
Should that be and cyberbullying?
No, because the
Oh,
title.
that's what the policy is.
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
title. I know, I looked at that, I'm like, dang it, it's supposed to, and it does have the and, but when it got put up, it's a thing. It did have, it said ensure all students comment, including LGBTQ.
Yeah, no, I did it.
I took that out because
That's
they're
okay.
inclusive of the
Right.
all students.
Right.
Can spell compelled speech, this was another one that was, the green actually came from an attorney, I liked it. So, that's why I put it there. It is not the intent of the district or its employees to be intentionally disparaging regarding the use of specific pronouns. Forcing students or teachers to use pronouns that do not correspond with an individual's biological sex is a clear violation of the First Amendment. The district cannot compel speech and require its administration employees or students to affirm any belief they do not hold. Addressing students by using their legal first and last name and addressing staff with titles, example, Mr., Mrs., or Ms., and their last name is acceptable communication. Yeah, Amy White's like, I don't know what's wrong with Mr. and Mrs., or students' first and last name, so.
I think that's good.
Or we have our student teacher.
They teach. Yeah. Okay, did we hit all of the bullet points on purpose?
I think the only one we didn't hit, and I don't know if this can be included or not, cause it's slightly different, but was about staff training and continuing education / teacher learning events. Maybe this is not the policy for it, but.
Do you have like I don't, is that covered in your professional development and staff training stuff?
Specifically transgender conversation?
Or I guess.
Like in Washington, my sister-in-law is a second grade teacher, and she has to go to trainings
For CRT.
for CRT and for transgender students and about using the right pronouns, and that she has to say
We
these
don't do any of
things.
that.
Yeah, I don't know, there was a training section on there that I took out because it was definitely leaning into the whole, you need to learn all this, and it's like, no, we don't, so we took it out. And I know that our district does an excellent job at making sure that there's always professional development, but it's not targeted for any community or
We
anything of
do
that sort.
discrimination, we're required to do Title IX, I mean, there are certain things we have to do, but that's not one of them.
Yeah.
Now, what do you do as far as, teachers, like CEUs, like when they have to do outside PD to get the required hours? Is there any requirements around that?
Yeah, so they have to submit it and get approval and all of that, so.
Okay, so that should be covered through that.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I was
okay,
reading
so-
this. I didn't know you were talking to the group.
So when teachers, so there's, you all have designated in-school PD, and then there's additional outside PD that teachers have to do to get all their hours in. I asked if they have requirements around that, it all has to be submitted for, which is amazing, because I know so many districts that are like, oh, go do whatever you want.
We actually have a
that-
sheet they have to fill out and.
And that has to be approved, so that woke ideology is probably not gonna get approved.
Is that in your like, do you have a certain policy that says here's the kinds of continuing education we accept?
We don't have that, but it's just, it's just a procedure that they have to do, and they have to get permission to type, just because it's a sub, it's a cost of the district, so.
They get permission before they take the class.
Do you all look at it like, I'm looking at the supplemental curricula that was just.
The principals look at it
Okay.
to determine what's the use, and so.
Okay. So then that's
I
probably.
mean, it has to be relevant to whatever the need is, so.
Okay. So it has to apply to what they're teaching and the standards
Mhm.
and the curriculum. Okay.
And I will tell you, I mean, they don't, like, most of the PD that they do now, or professional development they're getting now, a lot of our stuff is in-house, is what we're providing. Most of the time when they ask to go somewhere else, is they wanna go observe, to just get ideas for teaching styles and, just see different classroom management ideas and that kind of stuff, so they'll do peer observations, but aside from that, there's not a lot. I mean, our SLPs have specific trainings they have to go to for SLPs, the special ed teachers have to do training specific to special ed, and so it's really content specific, it's academics, it's not other stuff. So.
Hit delete, Michelle.
So we feel all those topics, okay.
So are we ready to send this out for survey? Survey for input through a survey?
Are all the legal references correct?
As far as I know, yes.
Well, we're probably gonna wanna amend this after some of the stuff is pushed
Oh.
through.
I've got one question too.
Yeah.
As something that has come up in conversations with other parents, given that trans students can become the social contagion where one student comes out, then all of a sudden their 3 girlfriends come out saying that. Is there anything that could be included in the policy that where parents would be notified, other parents who aren't the child's parents? Like if there were, I don't know how to say this in a very politically correct way. I just know parents who, if there were a trans student in their kid's classroom, who would consider pulling their kids out of the class.
I would do that if my kid was in elementary school.
I think
So I
mean,
I
that's
think
a
the only way you could do
federal
that.
violation, I can't disclose to you something
Right.
about another student.
Yeah.
I think the only way you
That's
could do
not your
that
own.
legally is if you send a note home for the purposes of explaining to the kid, hey, so-and-so wants to be called Jimmy instead of Jenny, or something like that. You don't have to identify the
It's still a
student.
violation, because you would be identifying the student.
What if you don't identify the student?
Yeah, you can do that without identifying the student.
You
Just
still-
if there is a student.
You could state that there's a student within our classroom, with a predominant female name that would now like to be called a predominant male name. That's not identifying who the student is, that's just stating that there is a female named student that now wants to be called a male named student. That's slippery slope, very slippery.
I think the reality is kids talk, so if there was a
Yeah.
kid that wanted, you'd probably know faster than anything we would send out. I think if we send something out that identifies the kid and think about communicable diseases and that kind of thing.
Right.
That's a slippery slope, we could get into big trouble, and you.
But with communicable diseases, you don't identify the student.
Correct.
You just
Right,
said
but
that
if
there
we were
was
to
a
say,
student
we don't even
in the
narrow it
classroom.
down to the classroom either.
Right, we just
Because
said,
if a kid's absent and you can identify, you know what I mean, so it's just, you have to be really careful, it would be a significant verbal
Oh,
violation.
yeah, and I do that all the time.
So, I mean,
They'll send out a communicable disease and I'll ask my daughter, who's absent in your classroom?
Right.
Stay away from them.
I mean, so, you would find out if there was a student, you'd know, I mean, you'd know, the kids know.
chances are where you're not gonna know is middle to high school. Because, if your child doesn't think that's a big deal, they may not come home to tell you. If they think it's a big deal, I'm sure they're gonna come home to tell you. But, yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I'd want some guidance from legal if that was something we were gonna do, cause I think that could be a big verbal violation.
because if you think about it, we don't send home if we know that a child's parent is affiliated with a hate group, just kind of along the same lines.
We don't send something if a dad is a sex offender,
Yeah, we don't do
Oh,
that.
really?
But he's not in the classroom.
but if he wanted to come to an assembly assembly.
He could be there.
Technically not, if he's a registered sex offender, he has to be so many feet away
I was
from
gonna
his
say,
children.
he has to be
He
someone.
cannot.
It depends on what that paper says.
It's true, but,
It's a slippery slope, I would want guidance there before we put something in there that puts the district at a liability.
Let's just blaze those trails. Just messing with you.
I was like, those guys, you can call. I mean, you know, that's a big deal, the confidentiality
It is.
piece.
you know, those parents that feel that way, I mean, one of the things, and I know it can be difficult to do, especially in junior high school, is just maintain a very good communication pathway with your child and build that trust. That, yeah, like, for my daughter, we have, and we've practiced this, that the truth will set her free, and that she is free and clear to share anything with us, and we promise that we will not get mad, and we'll have an open discussion about it. And that kid will not lie, she will not do anything, because she now appreciates the fact that she can come to us about anything. And this is personal, this is about kids in school, it's about everything, and we just keep it within the family. So, I'm hoping to keep that going through junior and high school, and so that she doesn't feel like she has to hide things from me.
I mean, from my perspective, kids don't keep anything a secret, so you will know. They just don't.
I did.
Even if they don't feel, I mean, they will keep it a secret, their own behavior, but they're gonna tell other people's behavior, you know what I mean, if there's something, and so, I mean, I don't know, I think there isn't a lot that parents, if you wanna know, your kids will tell you stuff that's happening,
A lot of times without realizing they're telling you.
yeah.
Oh, that projection happens a lot.
I don't know, I just, that could get us into,
No, I agree with you, it's,
Do you know if we have a transgender population at the elementary level?
I've not heard of that at all.
not in Spirit Lake Elementary.
I haven't heard one principal bring it up or even talk about it.
Well, what would you like? I mean, we can always add something, cause it has to go to the board after it goes up for,
I mean, if there's not a way to do it, then there's not a way to do it.
How big is the transgender population in the middle and high schools?
Honestly, I don't think I think it's a few.
Okay.
I mean, I don't even think, it might be on one hand kind of a thing. I think there's probably situations that the school doesn't even know about, like, it's just the family does their thing, and it's, so, I mean, that, I don't know about that, but to my knowledge, I can only think of, and doesn't mean this is accurate, but maybe 3 or 4 where I've heard where, you know, there's been some conversation, but at this point, there's no impact to school, they don't wanna do anything different, it's just, people know, you know what I mean? So, but I don't,
I think it is more than 3 or 4.
yeah, I think it is, but I'm just saying, like, those are the only ones I know that there's been discussion about, but I don't think it's large at all.
Well, I know at Timberlake, the students in the high school are referred to as the suicide club.
What?
Yeah.
What students,
The students that identify as LGBTQ, the other kids will refer to them
The
as
suicide club?
Mhm.
That's twisted.
It is.
I've heard that there's some of that, but it's from the Suicide Squad movie kind of thing, so that's what I've heard, but,
I heard this from a parent in high
yeah.
school.
So,
Interesting.
It's high school.
I know that. It's not a fun period. For
So
some.
the junior high.
Very
It's
true.
definitely going to junior high.
Very true. So do we want any other changes, modifications, more supportive language? Anything?
Let the parents be heard. Cause there will be a lot of feedback, I imagine, on this.
I think so, that's fine. I think under official, where it says student records and then change of official school records, it says official records required by law. I think it should be official school records, cause that's all we're dealing with.
Well, I mean, we deal with court papers, we deal with custodial stuff, we deal with.
Should it say official student records then? And then mirror the title? Because anything court-based or anything will be the student's record.
Specific to the student, yeah.
There's a lot of in the events in this.
I mean, I think the qualifier is needed.
Should the superintendent be this first in that?
I'll send it to Lisa first. I'll have Lisa review it first.
And then you'll let me know.
Okay.
If for some reason Lisa has a question or concern, then we'll let you know that and then have Rosanna maybe email the team and then we'll take the one info.
Okay.
Lisa's back out or,
I mean, if it's a simple question, but if
Right.
it's something that requires more in-depth conversation for us to have, then.
okay.
But it will be nice to have this completely done.
So then my next question is if Rosanna, we will meet again. We won't have this on them March, right?
No,
Cause that's in 2 weeks.
policy is the 15th and the board visit's the 13th.
Yeah. So we'll come back and look at the results on the 15th and then it'll be in the April.
Okay, that's fine. And hopefully we'll have more, cause this took 2 meetings, which is fine.
There's an extra special policy.
Very
So we get
special,
extra
big
meetings?
policy.
Well,
It
it's
is.
a big one and we need to be thoughtful.
It is.
Are we ready to, good stopping point for everybody?
I'm good.
You wanna shut the
Go
recording
ahead.
down?
In the meeting.